Hello, 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 world. This is Shruti Pandey, and today I have with me another legendary expert tester who is Katya, or who also loves to be called as Kat. And it's really good to have you on the program, on the podcast. And thank you so much for giving me your time and sharing your experiences with us.
Well, thank you for inviting me, Shruti. And I'm just another tester. I don't think I'm legendary, but anyways, thank you.
It's the experience that counts. I think it that way. It's probably the experience that counts.
I have been doing it for a few days. This is true.
No, you're being too humble. But let me start with asking you first things first, which I really am eager to understand. How did you get into testing, and were you like keen about it, or what were your perceptions and perspective about testing when you first got into testing?
When I first got into testing, and I will have to apologize, I may have still a little bit voice trouble. I was ill, as you know. Um, when I first got into testing, I had no idea that such a job existed, to be honest with you. I started my professional life as a chef, and then at some point I realized that I didn't like the working hours. So I found myself a job as I'm going to say support, but it was kind of a mix of customer support and community management role in a virtual world application called Second Life. I don't know if you remember that. It was a big thing in the early noughties or mid noughties, really. And when I was working there, my manager got a little bit fed up with me because I kept pointing out bugs to him. I was saying, you know that this thing isn't working and this other thing isn't working. And at some point, he was like, you know that we're hiring for a QA engineer, right? And I'm like, no, could I apply? So he encouraged me to apply. And that was when I learned that you can actually make a living from, finding fault with things, which turns out I was pretty good at. So that's how I got into testing. And I loved it immediately.
I totally echo your sentiments. It's a lovely job. You get paid to find defects from other people's problems. I mean, sorry, not being very narcissistic about it, but it is actually the nature of the job, right? You get paid in finding
Yeah.
faults. But it's so amazing to hear that you started off from chef. You didn't like the working hours. Did you enjoy the working hours in IT or corporate? Like, I don't think so. They are as pretty here.
In comparison, it is much, much better, right? As a chef, you often start very early in the morning, do a lot of prep work, have maybe a few hours off in the middle of the day, and then you work into the late nights. And to me, a 9 to 5 was like paradise, right? Obviously, it's not always exactly 9 to 5, but yeah, no. I really enjoyed the change. I do sometimes miss being a chef, to be honest with you, even though it's been 20 years now, but that's a different topic.
You also reminded me of a movie. I don't remember the name, but it had the Harry Potter character, and it was all about cooking and chef and how difficult that job is. A very recent movie, and yeah, maybe it looks easy, but
Yeah.
it's not so easy to cook for everybody.
No, it can be super stressful,
Yeah.
specifically, right? Because you're making most of your money in a couple of hours in the night normally, and the rest of the day is kind of just preparing for that. And in a way, that was not a bad preparation for being a tester, to be honest.
Yeah.
But
Yeah,
I
I
digress.
was about to relate it because I feel in many ways testers are, have that inbuilt feature of being a little artistic or creative in some way or the other. They just put it from there because I wanted to be a doctor and my father
Oh, really?
insisted me to not become a doctor and become an engineer rather. So I think
Okay.
testing is not as different from being a doctor, right? You will diagnose a patient, what's happening, why it's happening, and what's actually creating a problem. So I didn't leave that mindset of mine and it worked for me. And let me understand a little more from you on this. Like, what kept you at testing? Like, what made you stick with it?
Well, so because I entered in a kind of sideways fashion, and I had been interested in computers for quite a while at that point. So I had learned a few things on my own, but there was a lot to learn for me in the beginning, and I really like that. I really like the challenge of having the steep learning curve. I really enjoy that. And it turns out that never actually ends, right? If you direct your career in certain ways and make sure that you challenge yourself into new areas, then you can just continue doing that. And I think that is what has kept me in testing, the way you can explore different aspects of it. And when I said initially, I was really thrilled to learn that you can get paid for pointing out defects. That is no longer how I work, right?
Right.
These days, I'm all about preventing defect and
Exactly.
addressing this earlier in the cycle, but I just didn't know that in the beginning, right? So,
Yeah. I think it would have been so much more easier if people would have viewed testing as, ethical hacking. I keep calling that out loud many a times that testing is basically, preventing everything that a hacker would do and disrupt your security. Or yeah, because not just hackers, even if a user finds a little defect or a bug and just misuses it for his or her own use, it's actually hacking, right? So I think of testers and testing as ethical hacking. We are doing it all ethically and having that conscience to prevent things from happening, like some unsung superheroes.
it's an interesting way to see it, and that would certainly have appealed a lot to, my early days, or to me, I was in the early days, because one of the things I did before I changed into QA in that first customer support role I had, because it was a virtual world that was entirely made up from user created content, right? So basically everything you could see in this application was made by users. And we all know how that goes, right? A lot of people will create a lot of amazing stuff. Some people will create some not so amazing stuff,
Yes, yes,
right?
yes.
And that was a part of what I did, actually, was called governance, and was, preventing people from, I don't know, griefing others, basically. So
Yeah, and it's funny that in India, interchangeably people actually look as testers as you can be in customer support, you can be in customer success, and you can be in testing. Whereas, as a matter of fact, I think if we have done testing as one job brilliantly, we can be into anything really, be it community, be it governance, be it project management, program management, so many things, even development. And like you mentioned about a little bit of your characteristics and how your journey has been, it just propelled me to bring these things out loud. Because ethical hacking again, like, and I think what struck with me, and I felt like you're a soul sister when you said learning about testing, it just never stops. There's so much more happening every time. And if we just keep doing that right, we can be anything we want. Apart from
yes.
testers, or as a tester, we can be so much more. So I think you were already doing so many more things when you were a tester or you were in customer support. And thanks to your manager who actually let you know that you can actually get into something called as QA or testing. Good
Yeah,
chap.
he was one of the best managers I ever had.
Wow, lucky you. So let me understand from this point that you got into testing, you probably were enjoying testing, you stuck with testing. What led you to starting your own business? Like a corporate job is good, right? You start getting hefty packages after all those years of experience. Why start something of your own?
Well, yes and no. So what I really enjoyed in my career, I worked with many different companies, but I worked probably, you know how it is, right? In tech, you probably change every 3 to 5 years.
Yeah.
That's kind of how it happens often. And I worked with companies from early stage startups to very, very big companies, like doesn't get much bigger than that. And the last years, I worked with a consultancy where my role really became more that of a quality coach, where I would be sent in with a team of DevOps engineers as part of the team, but where I worked within the team really in a coaching capacity, more partially for the developers, because we worked in blended teams. So we would often have teams that had some of our developers, but also some of the clients' developers, so that they could learn how to work in a DevOps team, really, how to think about things in a more holistic manner.
Right.
And I would work with those developers, but I often, depending on the size of our client companies, they would have separate QA departments. So I would work with them as well to help them understand how QA fits in this kind of slightly different world of DevOps where testing is no longer separate and agile, right? Where testing is, or where quality is now really a team responsibility. But often nobody gives people training on how to actually achieve that, right? And then you end up with this weird world of teams working in Scrum where testers get everything to test in the last 2 days of the sprint, right? So I basically worked a lot with people to avoid that and learn how to really integrate testing into the entire software delivery life cycle. And then eventually that consultancy was bought out by a different company and became a lot bigger, a little more bureaucratic at that point in time. I knew that I enjoy more working with smaller companies. And so I joined another company where I took a role and head of, initially as test architect, but fairly soon moved over to become head of delivery. And then I left and realized that I really, really wanted to give it a shot building my own thing, right? That was at the time when pretty much everybody was made redundant, which I thought was a good time for me, to strike out on my own. It was a difficult year. I'm not going to lie. The market is still a little bit difficult, but I think the only way to remove yourself from the insecurity of sudden layoffs, of, companies shrinking their staff and their employee stock just so that their stock prices look a little bit better. I think the only way to do that really is to build your own thing. So I wanted to give it a go. That's how that started. So it was quite long-winded, but
No, I really, you actually brought back memories of my own corporate experiences and stuff like that. Because, it's funny that we feel geographically when we are different, culturally when we are different, things would happen in a different way with testers, but it's actually similar and actually same. All that you talked about, scrums and how we get the build in the last 2 days and we have to do everything. Like, it's funny that even after I have like hardly 13 years compared to you of work experience as a tester, but even year after year, technology after technology, advancement after advancement, getting scrum, agile, devops, everything into picture, still how testing happens with automation or whatever we may call is actually the same, which is why the problems are same and we are not getting anywhere further. And I also appreciate you mentioning about how difficult the market situation is with layoffs and everything happening and people becoming redundant. Thank you for being honest and being straightforward, in calling out what is a spade a spade. So let me also understand from you. You started your Kato coaching and everything looks hunky dory. When I, as an audience, look it from outside, but as you rightly mentioned about the market trend, the stocks, the companies also vanishing, right? Forget about
yeah.
jobs becoming redundant, but even companies are vanishing as such. So, how do you keep your business going, or how easy, difficult is it for you to have this journey ahead?
Like I said, so the first year was really difficult. Um, and yeah, I mainly relied on, subsidizing myself a little bit with my savings. It's getting a little bit better now. I think the market has recovered a little bit, but also I think it helps that people get to know me a little bit more, right? So in the beginning, it was mainly work coming in through my network directly. And I'm now seeing a little bit more coming from outside of my network, although most of the time it is still network in one way or another, right? The more people you know, the better this goes, really. Yeah.
So, are you enjoying this, or do you think you would ever get back into, becoming an employee at a corporate? What do you think?
I wouldn't, well, I never say never, right? I don't know what kind of situation I will be in a few years from now.
Right.
Right now, I really love what I'm doing. It's hard. It's a lot of work. I mean,
Yes.
if you ever see somebody saying, "Hey, build this 6 million or six-figure business with 10 hours of work a week," do not believe them. That is not going to happen. But I, but I'm liking it. I like that that I'm learning lot of new things. I had no idea about things like marketing, for example, or how to write a business plan, that kind of thing. That none of that is naturally was ever in my kind of field of vision. So that I really enjoy, and I have met a lot of amazing people as well, which I don't think I would have. Yeah, I'm loving it.
Good for you. I mean, yes, I think thanks for calling that part out loud as well, because when people think as a freelancer or solopreneur or entrepreneur, you have a very amazing life. It's, I think, even more work, because now you're doing all the more things that you have to do, because you are the business owner, you are the business, and how to get things going. So I can totally relate to it. It totally makes sense. And while this conversation was so light-hearted and quick, I didn't even realize all the time flying by. And thank you for being so candid and upfront, in answering my questions. Some people can tend to, hide their details and not want to answer and stuff like that. But you were so straightforward. I really appreciate it. Do you think there's anything that I missed asking you and you were thinking I should have asked you on this podcast?
I don't know. I don't know what you want to know. You know, I mean, it is maybe worth calling out specifically that one of the reasons or one of the things that motivate me doing what I'm doing is that I think that a lot of the problems we see in testing or in generally in quality are really systemic problems that stem from people not being educated about what quality means and what testing means in that context, right? Because I think quality in software development is more than testing,
Yeah,
right? And
absolutely.
it needs to encompass more than testing. It needs to encompass things like good teams, like in high performing teams, you need high psychological safety. You need to allow people to experiment. You need to allow people to fail. You need to allow people to have candid conversations early on in the process. You need to give people tools how to discuss what they're developing. Why are they developing these things? How are they developing these things? And how are they going to show that these things actually work and solve the problem they set out to solve, right? And all of these things, people, I think, don't get enough training in. And this is, in my opinion, anyways, one of the fundamental problems with quality in software.
Yeah.
And that is kind of where I come in and am hoping to offer at least a little piece of a solution, right? Obviously, I can't solve the world, but
I think you hit the nail directly by, calling it out that this is actually a mindset problem more than anything else. Because we can train humans, we can understand how to develop and how to test and how to code and etc., debug, DevOps, etc. But I think, yeah, more than anything, it's a mindset problem. And while you were answering one of your questions, I also felt like asking you, I'm sorry, I'm taking a step back and I want to really ask you this. Do you enjoy testing more or do you enjoy the DevOps part more? Or do you think it's a fine line between the two?
um, well, I'm going to say once a tester, always a tester.
Yes.
But as I mentioned before, these days, really my focus is on preventing bugs more than on finding bugs. What I like to talk about is how to test things. I like to help people figure out how to think about testing, right? So I have never been particularly keen on, for example, manually executed regression test suites. I think that is what computers are fantastic at, and we should let computers do that and free up humans to do the things that humans do well, which, has more to do with creativity and thinking on the spot and making decisions in fractions of seconds. That's what we do well. Like
Exactly.
I can look at a website and I know immediately if it's broken or not. The computer cannot do that,
Yes.
right? So so for me, it is a lot about that. It is about helping people understand how to use the tools at their disposal in the best way to suit their goals, really.
Kat, you just took my heart away by saying I can look at a website and understand if it's working or not. You're the first human, you're the first tester in all these years I have met. And I say this thing sometimes openly to people who reach out to me for work, or sometimes I just, have it as a thought in my mind and heart. But you look at something and you just know what's going on
Yeah.
behind. I don't know if that's a defect of a tester or it's just a good thing to have, but yeah, that is how it is. You look at something and you understand. Seriously, I feel like I found a soul sister today who, yeah, who feels like me, who thinks like me, and who tests like me. Thank you so much. I mean, I'm thanking my stars right now that I asked you to be on the podcast, really.
Oh, thank you.
And if you have any parting thoughts or maybe, like advice for testers who are listening to you, given again, in general, be it the difficult job situation, the time we have to just keep learning and everything that is going on, mad, mad world. Do you have any parting thoughts or any advice to people who are listening to you?
Well, so what I would advise, I think, anybody who wants to stay in the testing profession and wants to be successful at that, I think is A, learn to code. I don't think that testers who cannot understand, at least understand and read code and write some amount of code will be very successful in the future, because that gives you the tools and the language to talk with developers successfully, right? And that is mainly what you need. You need a way to communicate with people on their same level. And I don't think that this idea of the testers, of the go-between between the product and the developers, I don't think that is where we should focus our efforts anymore. I think it was a good model for a while, right? But things have moved on. And I think these days really we need to look at how can we as testers help people think about quality from the design through before development, through refinement, into the development phase, and after deployment, right? How do we move testing across the entire length of the software development lifecycle rather than just in this one brief little bit between development and deploy? So that's what I think. There you go.
Wow. Makes perfect sense, and I think this conversation really made my day. And I'll be repetitive if I say thank you again, but I have to thank you for being on the podcast and giving me your time. This was one hell of an insightful conversation, and I really enjoyed it. And thank you for being so upfront and candid.
No, thank you for inviting me. I'm very, very honored to be here.
Thank you.